According to a report, pre-pandemic literacy has improved across the state for third graders.
But progress has been threatened due to the pandemic. So Catherine Strunk, professor of education policy and director of the Education Policy Innovation Collaborative from Michigan State University, joining us to tell us more. Good morning.
Quite the title, right? Well, thanks for being here this morning. So just kind of break down this study for us and kind of, what you've found.
Sure. So this is a study that we've been doing for about a year and a half now. It's a 5-year study to evaluate the state's Read by Grade 3 law, which is the law that provides intensive literacy supports for struggling third grade readers and early readers in K through 3. And if they don't achieve at least a one level below grade level at the end of third grade, then they are retained. Or they may be retained, although retention was not done this past year due to COVID. So what we've been studying is what happened sort of pre-COVID until 2021. And we show that relative to trends coming into 2015-16 when the law was passed, actually third grade literacy has been improving marginally each year, and especially in districts with the most traditionally underserved students, low-income minority students. However, teachers and principals that responded to our survey told us that they're very worried that issues related to COVID, so not being in the classroom last spring, issues with literacy interventions, that they're worried that the progress that they're making is going to be stalled.
Yeah, and a lot of kids at home may not have access to several books. Libraries were closed for a little bit. They did have takeout and to-go services with different ways for those kids to get those books, but maybe talk about just the lack of resources, how that may have had an impact on these kids.
Sure. So when school buildings were closed last spring, no one was prepared. It just happened very suddenly. And so kids didn't have the traditional resources that they would normally have. They didn't have all of the books, and they didn't have all of the worksheets and everything else they were doing. Most importantly, they didn't have access to their teachers. So they didn't have access to the people that were working with them day in and day out to help improve their reading, writing, phonics, understanding, all of that. So when you take away those sort of resources, especially for kids in the early years, K through 3, who are really learning to read, it's very hard to teach reading over Zoom. And then when you get back into the classroom in the fall, for students who did return to the classroom, you couldn't do things like share the manipulative, share the things that you need to use to learn reading. You couldn't do things like have your teacher close to you, sitting over your shoulder, helping you understand what the words were saying. So it became very difficult. And in particular, kids who are identified for special education, who have special needs, those students who are really struggling to learn how to read, teachers and principals told us that those students really weren't getting the services that they needed during COVID.
And just real quickly, because we're kind of running out of time, but where do we go from here? What's next? What do you think has to be done?
Yeah. So I think that it's really important that we consider how to continue to support K through 3 students, their teachers, the coaches that are working with the teachers. So continuing to put funding into the system to provide more phonics instruction, more early literacy instruction. And thinking about retention this year again, if we have standardized tests, does it really make sense to hold third graders accountable for learning that they may or may not have had the opportunity to do over the course of the last 12 months?
All right, all good information there, Catherine. Thank you.